If I may, Kathleen Quigley, she is the presiding judge in Pima County Juvenile Court, and she oversees, I think, 13 other judges and commissioners. And certainly, you know, when we think of, at least when I think of juvenile court, I think what comes to mind is dependency and delinquency cases, but it's much more than that. I know you have many units, mediation unit, for drug diversion, certainly probation, and all those things. Judge Quigley doesn't do it alone. Obviously, she has help. And Tina Mattison is here. She's the deputy court administrator. I've been in that position about almost 3 years now, or 2 years, almost 2 years. And John Schow, who is the director of juvenile court services and chief probation officer. He still wears those two hats. So Judge Quigley has some help.
We have about 500 people that work at our court. I think that's about right. About 500, you're right. We have a children and family services division. We have the clerk of the court has a separate office there. We have a mediation department. We have probation. We have the judges. We have law clerks. We have JAs. We have, trying to think, Costa's house there. We have DCS co-locates some of their staff at our court so we can provide better services for the families. We have co-located at the court as well, behavioral health, and they oftentimes have liaisons at the court. And this has all been a process that's been coming about slowly, realizing that we can do a better job if we're there, and they're there, and we can meet together. And then John, I may have missed something on that side of the court before we go to probation.
We do have our own IT and our own network staff that supports the entire juvenile court, as well as the agencies within our facility. Our facilities management team keeps the building up and running, and we also have a new component, our security component. So that also comprises of not only the VetSec, the county's security, but we also have our own court security officers in the building. So they're armed personnel that are there. We have 2 officers that help assist with any security issues that come into the building. And that's for safety of the people that come in, but as well as the court staff itself.
So on the delinquency side, in Arizona, probation and detention come under the judicial branch. In a lot of other states it's under the executive branch, but we're fortunate enough in Arizona to have it under the judicial branch. So that way probation can work very closely with the judge. And so we have about 300 officers and staff that work in probation and detention. Detention, of course, is a 24/7 operation, so it requires quite a few people to keep it going. When we built our building in 2016, almost 17 years ago, we opened on Valentine's Day in 2000. We opened a building that had 306 beds for kids in the detention facility, and today we have 58 kids there. We did top 200 at one point, but our average daily population, the highest average daily population, was 176. And so in 2004, we intentionally started really juvenile reform efforts, mostly on the detention side, to bring that down. We looked at the kids that we had in detention. It was our philosophy that, and law enforcement's philosophy, not just here in Pima County, but everywhere, that when kids were arrested, they were brought to detention, and most of them were detained. That was also our philosophy with kids that were violating the probation. That was the consequence, was they were detained. That doesn't happen that much anymore.
What would you say the average length of the stay was, and has that shortened also?
It's actually lengthened. And the reason it's lengthened is because the kids that we're keeping now are really more appropriate, and they're higher needs, and a lot of them are waiting for placement. So sometimes we have kids that are in there 100+ days, every once in a while. But the average daily population has increased from 17 to about 23 days. And but the majority of kids that are arrested and brought to detention actually actually, if they stay, they see a judge the next day at 2:30, and most of the time, a lot of the times, the kids are released at that point or at their next hearing. So, since we still have kids in detention, we've really worked hard to not only to reduce that number, but to make the experience in detention more normalized. So kids don't wear jumpsuits or anything like that anymore. They wear polo shirts and just like and khakis. They go to school every day.
There?
At the school, yeah, we have a school there. It's run by the Pima County Superintendent's Office. It's an accommodation school district. And the kids, so they go to school during the day. They have activities. The food there is good. And we have programs in detention for them. We have a branch of the Pima County Library in our detention facility. The courtyard outside of the library has been turned into a garden. Kids grow their own food. It's USDA approved to eat, and so they eat what they grow. And it's actually really therapeutic. We have clinicians. We have a medical unit that's provided, it's funded by the county, with nurses, doctors available, and mental health services are available there. Our staff are all trained in motivational interviewing. Our philosophy, we adopted a Kids at Hope philosophy, so our philosophy is that all kids are capable of success, no exceptions. And so we come to work every day with that philosophy.
Are there parental visits?
Yes.
Or family visits?
Family visits. You have to have a special visitation if a child, if there's a sibling under 18. So normally, with parents and older siblings, grandparents can come and visit. They can come and visit every day. So there's no restrictions on the visit. There's certain times for visitation, more on the weekends and in the evening, during the evening on the weekdays, because the kids are in school during the day. So we've also adopted it's a validated risk assessment for when kids are brought in by law enforcement. We run them through an assessment, and if they're low risk, they aren't detained. If they're high risk, they are. So the kids there are a lot of kids that are brought by law enforcement that are released. We just don't keep them. We screen them, and then we don't keep them. On the probation.
I'm sorry, what are some of the factors that go into your risk assessment?
If they have a history of warrants, if they, depending on also the presenting offense, why they were brought there in the first place, score some points. If they're on standard or intensive probation and they commit a new crime, that's additional points. So it's a 12-point system. And but a kid, there's also some mandatory detained. So if a kid is brought in on a warrant, that's a mandatory detained. Or if they're brought in on a probation violation by probation, they've already run that through a whole system of graduated responses before they've got to that level. And then if they are at that level, then they can bring them in on a probation violation, and they will stay for that. Also, if they have a warrant out of Arizona Department of Juvenile Corrections or out of another county or state. So we do get kids that are arrested from California, New Mexico, that have warrants that they stay in. We contact the other jurisdiction and come pick them up, and they don't face charges here unless they were arrested for a new charge here. A kid that comes in, tonight, we'll have a hearing tomorrow at 2:30. So there's hearings every day, on the weekends or earlier. And on the probation side, we've shifted to an evidence-based practice model with the same Kids at Hope philosophy. So we received just under 8,000 referrals last year. Referral is an arrest, but most of those are paper arrests. They're cited to the parents, and the parents sign a promise to appear, and then they come in and meet with the probation officer. Most of those cases are diverted. They don't, not only do they not see a judge, they don't even go over to the county attorney's office. We have permission from the county attorney to divert any first and second misdemeanors other than DUI, and some low-level felonies like possession of marijuana not on a school grounds. Then we assign it to an investigation officer, and the investigation officer does a very thorough family background and assessment, a risk and needs assessment that's validated. It's designed out of the University of Cincinnati. And So when the probation officer is making a recommendation to the judge whether there should be probation or not, they're also recommending what the treatment plan is going to be and the case plan. So we will get kids that don't meet the diversion criteria, that do go to the county attorney, that do get a big position. And then those, once we do the risk and needs assessment on the youth, if they're low risk, we're not recommending probation. So we could actually be going to the judge for disposition. They've been adjudicated, we're going for disposition, and if they're low risk, we're not recommending probation. And in those cases, the judge has the option to still put them on probation if he or she feels that way, that it's appropriate, or we'll do what we call a consequence and close. So we may just assign some community service, maybe sometime ensure that they're enrolled in some type of treatment and close the case. Kids that are put on probation, there's a standard probation and an intensive probation, and they're supervised based on their case plan and according to their risk. As we lowered our detention, daily detention population, we also have lowered our probation population. So back when we had 176 daily population in detention, we had close to 1,000 kids in Pima County on probation, juvenile probation, 300 of those on intensive probation. Now we have less than 400 kids on probation, period. About 100 on intensive probation and around 300 on regular standard probation. This has all been intentional. We're very, very deeply involved in juvenile justice reform efforts. So the detention efforts were the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative run by the NEKC Foundation, and we adopted evidence-based practice model. It was actually formed out of the National Institute of Corrections for the parole or community supervision. We're also involved in the crossover youth practice model because we have kids that are involved in both the delinquency and the dependency system. So we're concentrating on what we can do better there, and that involves a lot of communication with DCS and with Simpatico, our new behavioral health authority in Pima County. So we've been working with those two entities very, very closely to see what we can do to better address the kids that are in both of the systems. When the kids cross over, you can cross over from delinquency into dependency, but now they're saying, it used to be 80%, now they're saying 85% of the kids that cross over from one system to the other are dependent first. And then at some point, acting out behaviors, either in group homes or schools mostly, they cross over into the delinquency system. We're working on some of our diversion programs that we have that have a parent component to it. We're working with those programs to modify them. So teen court is an example, or community justice boards through the county attorney's office is another example where there's a parent component. We're working with them to so that we can send more crossover kids that are involved in the dependency system that may not have a parent involved at that time. So we can use those programs. And because the crossover kids have traditionally not been offered diversion at the same rate as non-delinquent or dependent youth, and we want to change that.
Another thing that we're looking at with the crossover model is our model at our juvenile court is one family, one court, so one judge. So if a child has a delinquency matter and a dependency matter, the same judge should hear it. But the person that's not at the table, or the group that's not at the table for that, oftentimes is the county attorney. And so the petitions come to them from the group homes for an assault in the group home, or they damage something, or something happened in the foster home. And we all know that many times these children are acting out because they're just angry, or they're upset, or something triggered them, and it's really not truly a delinquent act, but when it comes to the county attorney's office with a police report, it looks delinquent. And so I think if we do a better job and try to involve the county attorneys more so that they get better information about the children, they can make better decisions on whether or not to truly file a petition. Because we'll be in court, and I'll just, one case, one of the young men I have on my caseload, he and another boy got engaged in a pillow fight. The one boy got some red marks on his back, and they called the police, and this young man was referred. He comes to the county attorney's office. He had some referrals years ago when he was in group homes because he was just angry. His mom's not around, his dad's not around, his siblings, they were all separated. So they filed a petition because he'd had other petitions before. Well, when it came to do, by the time I got to disposition, there was really nothing I could do but give something. So I gave what the probation officer recommended, which was a few hours of community service, and that was it. And he and the boy are friends. I really wish that had never been charged. The county attorney doesn't fully always understand this, so we are working with this to do a better job so that the appropriate children are charged.
So on that, and what you were just saying before about one court, one family, are you trying to get one county attorney to follow a child throughout the process rather than bouncing around?
Well, I think they assign them now by area, and that's how they assign the county attorneys to the cases.
And they're only involved in the delinquency part of it, because the AG.
Well, that's what I'm just saying, if you could get the county attorney to say, okay, if this kid comes back, it's the same county attorney. So there's some sort of follow-through or knowledge.
That's something they can consider at their office, yes, certainly.
Right now it's geographic by high school area.
Along the same lines, how has law enforcement been involved with these reforms? Because if your numbers of referrals are steady, but you're dealing with the back end of it in a different way, has it affected the number of referrals?
Referrals have gone down over the last 10 years. So our referrals from law enforcement, but that's a national trend. Juvenile crime is down all across the United States. It is down a little bit more here than other places. And then as you get deeper into our system, our numbers have gotten better as compared to national numbers. Last year, we committed only 13 kids to the Arizona Department of Juvenile Corrections. So out of those 8,000 referrals, when you get to the prison end of it, there were 13 kids that were committed. We only have 10 in the secure facility in Black Canyon right now, Adobe Mountain.
And law enforcement's been very involved, so.
I was gonna say, we're very collaborative
Yeah.
with them.
The one thing that we haven't talked about yet really is our collaboration. And so out of our collaborations, with law enforcement, the county attorney, probation, the public defender, all involved, and the schools. We came up with a school guideline, resource guideline, of maybe recommending when schools should call law enforcement, maybe when they shouldn't call law enforcement. And so there's been work on that, and they're involved there. And all the collaborations we have, law enforcement is at the table.
And when they're in a group home, do they go to the school from their home district?
Well, that's become a challenge because McKinney-Vento is sort of changing as of December, and that's going to be a challenge because it says that the DCS and the schools are responsible, and everybody's sort of pointing the finger about who's responsible, and it's becoming very difficult. But they do try to keep one of the goals, we do have a large agitation committee at the court that it works a lot with the community, and we're working with the Cradles to Careers, which you may be familiar with. And so we're working very closely with that, but they try to keep the kids in their home school. But sometimes logistically speaking, it's really difficult to keep the children in their home school. So,
Especially when you have to bus them 2 hours there, or hour there and an hour.
ABO Journal had.
3 hours on the road.
I'm not real familiar with the legislation, but every Student Succeeds Act, yes, and especially if you're in foster care,
Mhm.
you have to go,
Right.
have to, but the requirement to go to your home school district.
right, well.
If possible.
Right,
you know?
yeah, right.
So the detention school has just hired a new, actually created a new position that's a transition coordinator. So his role is to, every new child that comes into detention is to contact the home school immediately and have them there for our meetings, somebody from the school at our meetings when we're planning the transition back into the community. And trying to keep them in that home school, because once they come into detention, if they spend one night, Annie Casey Foundation's research has shown that it greatly decreases their chances of graduating from high school, just one night. When you keep them there a week or 2 weeks, they've lost that semester of school. They're behind already. So it's very important to us that we connect them back to their home school. And also so that they can continue the same type of work that they were doing at their school.
We've been going around and meeting with all the superintendents from all the districts in Pima County because we want to reach out to them to let them know what we're doing. And one of the issues we all have in common is our kids that are in detention. And so a lot of them didn't even know when we were meeting with them at what child-family team meetings were, and that these were going on, and that really school should be at the table. So by reaching out and going to them, we're trying to make the connections to get them to do a better job for their kids, so they can transition back to the school more easily.
When we started working on our reform efforts, and we looked at our detention population, and we wanted to see who was in our detention facility, and we found out that we were full of kids that were arrested for misdemeanor domestic violence, because you mentioned DV earlier, but it's different for a kid. When law enforcement is called to a home for violence within the home, and it's a child and a parent, or a child and another sibling, they arrest the child. They have to remove somebody. They arrest the child and they leave the parent. The parent's got other kids. And sometimes it's domestic violence, disorderly conduct, domestic violence, criminal damage, where they hit a hole in the wall, they slammed the door, a picture fell off and broke. It's criminal damage, domestic violence, and so they get that label on them. And they were misdemeanors, they were coming to our detention center, they were staying the night, the county attorney was filing a petition on them. They were going to court and going on probation. We put them on probation, of course, we give them house arrest, right? In the home.
Same environment.
So probation violation, and their cycle was continuing. So we opened a domestic violence alternative center, which we've actually expanded the service there, and we're calling it our ACES Center. It's on our property, but law enforcement can bring, instead of going to the detention door, they come to the ACES door and they walk in. It's an old detention pod that, since we've lowered our population, we have space. So we got the library, we got the medical unit, now we've got the ACES Center. They walk in there and it's like a living room. There's carpet, or there's rugs, and there's recliners and couches and TV. And people that meet them there, they process them in. Law enforcement leaves and they're back out on the street, protecting the community. And we've got the child there. We can divert those kids. Most of those kids are eligible for diversion, so they don't have to go to the county attorney for a petition. And we can also provide 23-hour respite. So because the parents, there's still some, tension there. So if the parent wants to go to work the next morning and come and pick them up when they get off work the next day, that's fine. We can give them 23 hours. We could connect them to a shelter, but we hardly ever do. Now that everybody's calmed down, they can come in, we can have a conversation, we can refer them to services, and they're on their way. We had about 765 kids last year referred to our evac center rather than taken to the detention store. So that really helped us on both the detention and the probation side.
I guess one of the other issues we see, not a lot, and Ed's one of our immigration attorneys, will probably speak this better than I, but I just had an SIJS case, and I don't know if you see a lot of that, Judge. I did it through the guardianship side of it, actually, to get the findings and the guardianship. Do people coming on dependencies seeking that?
We do, and I'll tell you, we have a committee right now that's working pretty diligently. It's a transnational committee, and we have the Mexican consulates working with us, both from Nogales and from Pima County, and we have a judge from Santa Cruz County as well who's involved. We have DCS involved, we have attorneys involved, and Mo Goldman, and you guys know that. So they do a lot of work. Rebecca Curtis, we were at the Florence Immigration Project, and so we work on those, and we're actually working on procedures on what we do to make sure that those children who are eligible for SIJS are routed the direct way. And we're doing a checklist, because a lot, get these cases, a lot of times judges don't know. There's so much information in juvenile court. The learning curve is, I've been there since 2003, and I feel like I learn something new every day. So trying to train a new judge that comes in, who's only gonna be there for 3 years, is really difficult. So we're working on this, we're working on a checklist, and we're gonna develop it and try to get it to go statewide, but we do deal with that.
Are there other issues that we see? talk about? Or,
We do have, the dependency side, we touched a little bit about the mediations, and, but we have 1,300 dependency, cases opened, currently. Actually, that's the filed, dependency cases filed a year, and open cases we were at about 3,400. So that's a larger population that we're dealing with, and so, and Judge Quigley can talk about the majority of the bench time is spent on dependency cases. So, John's taking care of all of the kids in the delinquency side by you know, all of the programs, the diversion programs, and in doing things with the youth so that they're not getting into the system. But our dependency population spiked about 2012, like 50%. And we're still high. We really haven't lowered too much. We keep looking at the numbers and it's staying about the same. Our mediation unit, we have 4 mediators and we keep them busy. They do about 2,000 mediations, which basically having us trying to settle cases, and if not settle cases, really get the parties to talk about, you know, what are the things that we can agree upon, or things that we can just kind of come together on, and really leave the main issues with the judicial officers and have them address those, so that the hearings are meaningful and we get through them a lot quicker. Overall, dependency hearings, we've held about 20,000 of them a year. So, like I said, it's the majority of the court's time and effort in that. We also have an adoptions unit, and that's probably one of our happiest moments in the courthouse. We have our national adoption in the park day. We do adoptions in the park, and we have about 100 kids that are going to be adopted this November, what date was it? 20th.
Not literally in the park, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
literally.
in the park?
We actually set aside some time in a park and do this and invite the families. And it has become an event for these families. But just overall, we do have our adoptions, and when we can get to that point, it is a very happy, come to the courthouse on Thursday afternoon, and it's usually pretty packed with a bunch of smiling faces, and the kids are all dressed up and they're adorable.
Or there's separate attorneys, sometimes private attorneys, sometimes the attorneys who represent them through in the dependency will do the adoptions also?
No, the AG's office steps back, and there's a caseworker from the department. They're now actually, used to be St. Nick's. St. Nick's is closing, and DCS is going to internalize all their adoptions. That's interesting. We'll see how that goes. So they do that, but usually it's either the county attorney or the, oftentimes Strickland, Heather Strickland's office will do it now. She took over for.
Yeah, there's a couple of private. And then we have our family drug court. In our family drug court, we have, I don't remember the number of families. I think we're about 50 families in our drug court, and that's nationally known. And we get, we are on our 6th year of a SAMHSA grant to help with that program, and they keep giving us money. We just got to keep it going. But it has a really, I think, a 60% reunification rate with that group. And the court has actually hired recovery support specialists, so to assist these families in particular, to walk alongside the parents in the drug court. And that's worked out really well. And like she was saying, Judge Quigley was saying about the DCS being there co-located, it's actually for the family drug court. So the DCS, there's only about 6 of them and a supervisor, and it's strictly for that caseload.
Or you see use and abuse of opiates, just like.
Opiates is the highest one. It's the highest that we see. And the other thing that we've done at the court is we're really focusing on the trauma aspect. So when we talk about what those kids are being exposed to, not only the drugs, but just the trauma of being in perhaps an abusive situation, and in that type of family environment. So about 3 years ago, the trauma the court did a trauma, before I got there, the court decided to do a trauma audit, but it was system-wide for the court. So they talk to the stakeholders, they talk to everybody about how is the court being trauma responsive. And so we've implemented, I think we're in about 100 different recommendations. How could we do a better job? And it went from lighting of the lobby to color of the palette of the rooms to, just making people aware. Some of our programming, the language that we use. So we've implemented a lot of those things in our court, and we continue to look at it and see how we can do better.
And how many parent attorneys do you think you have that are Spanish speaking?
Not
Right.
enough.
Not enough.
It's interesting, we were noting today, I think we have more need for interpreters on the delinquency side of the court than we do on the dependency side.
For parental.
It's really interesting that we do. We tried for a while to have in-house interpreters for some of the like African dialects and things that came in, but the problem we were running into is a lot of that was, is that they're very small communities, and then they knew each other, and so that made it really embarrassing and difficult, and so
Yeah.
it was much better to, more efficient.